The night began like any other, until the moon did not rise. At first, they waited. The tribe stood on the shore, eyes fixed on the horizon where the silver disk should have climbed, slow and certain, as it always had. But the sea remained black. The sky was an empty wound. Stars blinked weakly, uncertain, as if afraid to exist without their queen. The old ones whispered that perhaps the moon was late. Perhaps she had turned her face away for reasons only gods could understand. The waves answered differently. They struck the rocks harder, impatient, white teeth gleaming in the dark. The water pulled farther than it ever had, dragging the scent of salt and death with it. The earth trembled beneath their bare feet. The night had weight. It pressed upon the chest, heavy and silent, as if something vast and unseen had settled over the world. Firelight flickered between them, the only witness of their fear. The flames bent low, fighting the wind that came from nowhere. Sparks rose, tried to climb toward the heavens, and vanished, swallowed whole by the blackness above. No reflection touched the water, no shadow had shape. Everything was devoured by a darkness so thick it seemed to breathe. The children cried softly. The mothers covered their eyes, not to block the sight, but to block the feeling, the cold that came from inside, from the part of the mind that still remembered the time before light. The hunters looked to the shaman. He stood apart, near the water's edge, his body painted in ash and white clay, bones hanging from his neck like fragments of stars. His gaze never left the sky. In the weak firelight, his eyes looked hollow, filled not with fear, but with recognition. He whispered something, a sound more than a word. The wind carried it away. Behind him, the waves began to glow faintly, not with light, but with motion. Tiny creatures stirred beneath the surface, flickering with pale blue fire. The tribe gasped. It was the sea's own blood showing them a reflection of what they had lost. For a heartbeat, the water shimmered like the ghost of the moon. Then it died, and the darkness returned. The night deepened, the fire shrank, the world seemed to hold its breath, and then came the sound, low, drawn, mournful, like the groan of a god too large to move. The mountain far inland echoed it, a rumble that rolled through the bones of every living thing. Birds took flight into the void, wings cutting through unseen air. They vanished without direction. The shaman turned toward the tribe. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "The sky has closed its eye," he said. No one answered. Some fell to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the sand, whispering old prayers that had not been spoken since their ancestors were dust. Others stared upward, mouths open, faces wet with salt tears. They could not tell if the sea wept with them, or if it merely hungered. The darkness moved closer, not as shadow, but as presence. It filled the space between the trees. It filled the lungs. It filled the soul. Animals howled in the distance, then fell silent mid-cry. The wind turned colder, sharper, scented with stone and metal. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a tree split with a sound like thunder, though no storm touched the air. The shaman lifted a torch and raised it high. The light shook, defiant and small. "Look," he whispered, "the night has no end." And truly, it did not. Hours passed, though none could measure them. Time no longer moved. It only waited. The tribe huddled close, their faces half lit, their eyes wide and glassy. Every breath was prayer, every silence an answer they could not bear to hear. When the last flame of the fire finally died, they saw what the moon had left behind. Nothing. Only the shape of the world remembered in memory. The shaman sank to his knees, his hands buried in the wet sand. He closed his eyes and spoke to the dark. "If you have gone," he said, "take our sight with you, for we cannot bear to see your absence." No echo replied, only the rhythm of the waves, slow and cruel, carrying the sound of their small hearts beating against the vastness. And in that endless, holy blackness, the first true fear of the divine was born. Before the sky forgot her, the moon was their mother. She ruled the night not as a queen, but as a patient watcher, silent, constant, gentle. Her light touched every surface like a hand smoothing rough skin, Under her gaze, rivers shone like paths of milk, and even the predators of the dark walked softly, their rage dimmed by her silver calm. The tribe lived by her rhythm. They were the children of the pale eye. Each evening, as the sun bled into the sea, they would climb the stones near the shore and wait for her ascent. The first to spot her white curve on the horizon would cry out, and a murmur would ripple through the people, joy, relief, belonging. They had seen her again, and therefore, they existed again. The shaman said she was the reflection of the soul of the world. When she waned, the spirits slept. When she grew, they danced. The women washed their hands in the moonlight before births. The hunters carried bone charms carved in her shape. The children, too young to understand reverence, traced her reflection on the water with their fingers, laughing as the ripples turned her roundness to silver ribbons. The moon was not worshipped as a god, but loved as a mother. Her face was faith itself. Every night the fires burned low, because they did not need their light. The moon gave enough. The air shimmered with quiet peace, soft winds through tall grass, the scent of sea salt and smoke. Far from the village, wolves howled, not in hunger but in communion. Even their cries sounded like prayer. The tribe believed the moon could hear them. When they sang, their voices were offerings. When they danced, their footsteps echoed through her white halls above. One night, they gathered for the Feast of Reflection, the oldest of their rites. It began with silence. The shaman drew circles in the sand, each one smaller than the last, until only a single spot remained, the center of the world, he said, where the moon first kissed the sea. Around that spot, they placed stones smoothed by the tide. Between them, they lit fires of dried driftwood that burned with a pale blue flame, almost colorless beneath her glow. The dancers began to move, slowly, barefoot, faces lifted upward, arms rising and falling like the waves. The light touched their skin and made it shimmer, as though their bones glowed from within. The sound of drums joined, deep, hollow, rhythmic. The night pulsed. The sea breathed. The stars seemed to sway to their heartbeat. It was said that when the world was young, the moon had descended once to the earth, wearing a body of water and light. She had walked among their ancestors, teaching them to see in darkness and to dream with open eyes. The shaman told this story as the drums thundered. His voice rose with the rhythm, old words rolling from his tongue, not spoken, but remembered. They believed she still listened. At the edge of the firelight, an elder knelt with his granddaughter beside a bowl of still water. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the moon's reflection trembling in it. "She sees you. And when you see her, you see yourself." The child dipped her hand in the water, disturbing the perfect circle. The reflection broke and reformed again. She laughed. The elder smiled, though his eyes carried something unspoken. The faint weight of knowing that nothing remains constant, not even the gods who seem eternal. As the night deepened, the moonlight grew sharper, turning stones white and the sea to silver fire. The air smelled of salt and smoke and skin. The tribe lay down beneath the open sky, their faces calm, their dreams bright. Above them, the moon watched like a sentinel, perfect, whole, unblinking. No one noticed the faint halo forming around her, a thin ring of red that bled at the edges. It was small, gentle, almost beautiful. A warning disguised as grace. The shaman alone stirred from sleep. He looked upward and frowned. The air had grown heavy, the way it does before thunder, though no cloud moved. He whispered an old phrase, a prayer he hadn't spoken in years. It meant, "May the gods rest well," but the words tasted strange, as if the air no longer knew their shape. He closed his eyes. The sea exhaled softly. The moon burned white above him, flawless and merciful. For now. The moon began to fade 3 nights later. No one spoke of it at first. They told themselves the air was thick, the clouds too high, the wind too restless. But deep in their bones, they knew. The light had grown weak. It no longer painted their skin silver. It merely brushed it, like a memory. The sea still shone, but faintly, as if ashamed to reflect her fading face. The shaman noticed before anyone else. He watched the tide crawl higher each evening, touching stones it had never touched. He saw the fish that came ashore and did not struggle, their scales dull, their eyes clouded. He listened to the forest. No owls, no insects, no night song, only the quiet breathing of things that waited. The wind carried a new scent, iron, old blood, the kind of smell that makes the tongue dry. At night, when the tribe gathered to pray, their shadows stretched longer than usual, bending toward the fire as if the flames were pulling them in. Sparks drifted upward but vanished before reaching the dark sky, as though the air itself had forgotten how to glow. The moon hung above them, pale and trembling, her edges blurred by a mist that had no source. The children asked why she looked sick. The elders told them she was tired, but the shaman knew better. He could feel her silence pressing against the world. He climbed the cliff that overlooked the ocean, the same place where their ancestors once called to the sky, and sat cross-legged on the stone, his staff planted in the ground beside him. The tide roared below, restless and gray. He raised his hands and began to hum, a low note that carried through the salt wind. His voice was a question, but no answer came. The mist thickened. The moon pulsed, once, twice, as if something vast beneath her skin had moved. Then she dimmed, like a breath leaving a dying body. The shaman's eyes filled with tears. He pressed his forehead to the stone. "Why do you hide your face, mother?" he whispered. "What have we done?" No voice answered, but the sea did. A single wave rose higher than the rest, breaking upon the cliff with a sound like a heartbeat. Spray washed over him, cold and sharp. When it cleared, he saw something on the horizon, a faint shimmer, distant and wrong, like the glint of wet bone under the moonlight. He blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, the world felt older. The sky was colorless. The sea moved slower. Even the birds that survived the night flew low and silent, their wings heavy with dread. The tribe gathered by the fire, eyes wide, voices small. The women whispered that the moon was angry. The men said she had turned her gaze from them to punish their arrogance. A child asked if she had died. The shaman spoke softly. "The gods do not die, but they can forget." He took ash from the fire and drew a circle on the ground, its edges uneven. Inside it, he pressed his palm, leaving the mark of his hand. Then he traced lines radiating outward, rivers, stars, light. When he finished, he looked to the people. "The moon walks among us still," he said, "but her path has turned dark. We must remind her who we are." That night, they performed the rite of reflection, a ritual not practiced in generations. The shaman painted his body with ash and crushed shell, his skin shining faintly in the dim light. He lit no torches. Instead, he burned herbs that released thick, white smoke, sweet and bitter at once. It filled the air with the smell of dreams. The tribe formed a circle around him. They began to hum, low, trembling, uncertain. The sound rose and fell with the wind, echoing the rhythm of the waves. The shaman raised his staff toward the moon. The top of it held a piece of polished bone that caught the weak light and shimmered faintly, a last echo of her radiance. The smoke thickened. The sound deepened, and for a moment, the moon seemed to brighten. But then, it flickered. A shadow crossed her face, long and thin, stretching from one edge to the other. It moved like a scar across the heavens. The people gasped. The children covered their eyes. The shaman froze, the staff trembling in his hand. When the shadow passed, the moon was smaller, dimmer, almost transparent. The waves struck the shore with sudden force, as if something had fallen into the sea. A rumble followed, deep and slow, from far beneath the earth. The shaman looked upward, lips trembling. "The gods are speaking," he said, but his voice was not certain. He looked down to the sand where his circle had been drawn. The mark of his hand was gone. The sea had reached it. The tide was higher now, and still climbing. There came a night when the moon did not rise. The people waited, as they always did, eyes turned toward the dark horizon, breath held in quiet reverence. But the sky was empty. The sea reflected nothing. The clouds, though thin, glowed with no light. It was as though someone had closed the eye of the heavens. They waited longer. The wind fell still. The waves retreated, whispering as they went. The torches dimmed, not for lack of flame, but because the air itself seemed to swallow the light. And in that moment, the world became ancient again. The old ones began to weep. The youngest among them had never known true darkness. They had been born in the age of the moon's mercy. Now, for the first time, they met the night as it had been before the gods taught humans to see. Their hearts knew it instantly. This was the shape of the world without love. The shaman stood before the fire, though the fire gave no glow. His staff trembled in his hand, the bone ornament at its tip no longer catching light, only shadow. He closed his eyes and listened. For hours he listened. The air had a pulse. It throbbed faintly, like a heartbeat buried deep beneath the soil. But it was not kind. It was the slow breath of something vast and sleeping. When he opened his eyes again, the horizon had vanished. The sea and the sky had become one single, endless void. "The gods are silent," he said. "The night has swallowed their voices." A mother clutched her child tighter. A hunter threw his torch into the sea, shouting for the moon to return her face. The torch hissed and died. Another fell to his knees and dug his hands into the wet sand, as though he could anchor himself against the pull of the dark. Then came the sound, deep and mournful, like the cry of the world itself. The sea began to roar again, but not as before. The tide rose higher, faster, dragging with it pieces of driftwood and bone. The earth trembled. Somewhere in the distance, a mountain groaned. Rocks split with a slow, terrible grace. The tribe huddled together, faces pressed against faces, breath mingled. They whispered prayers not to be heard, but to remember they could still speak. The shaman lifted his arms toward the sky. "Moon Mother," he called, voice breaking, "we have not forgotten you. Return your light to your children." His words echoed and fell back, empty. Even the wind refused to carry them. Something stirred in the water, not a wave, not a creature, but a shimmer, faint and wide, stretching across the black surface. It looked like a reflection without a source. The shaman stared at it, and his knees weakened. For a moment, it seemed as if a great white eye opened beneath the sea, but then it blinked, and was gone. He turned to the tribe. "The moon has descended into the deep," he whispered. "She has fallen into the water. The earth god has taken her for himself." A murmur rippled through the crowd, disbelief, then terror. If the gods fought, what hope was left for the small ones? The hunters gathered stones, as if stones could defend them. The women pressed their palms to the ground, feeling for warmth, for life. They felt only the cold pulse of the earth below, slow, steady, indifferent. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen dust. Breathing became labor. The fire crackled, then choked, then died. The smoke rose and twisted upward but vanished halfway, swallowed by the darkness. The stars above flickered, one by one, then dimmed. The sky was closing. The shaman fell to his knees, tearing his necklace of bones and casting it into the sea. "She cannot hear us," he said. "The path between worlds is broken." The people began to chant, softly at first, then louder, not words, only sounds, a deep vibration born of despair. The rhythm came from instinct, not faith. They swayed, their bodies finding comfort in the ancient cadence of fear. The sea responded, rising and falling with each beat. And then, for the briefest moment, the surface of the water glowed, faint, pale, alive. The shape of the moon appeared there, trembling on the tide, a ghost of herself. But before they could cry out, the light shattered, fragments scattering across the waves like broken shells. A whisper passed through them all, though none could tell from where it came. "She has been devoured," the shaman's voice broke. "Then the world will freeze," he said. "Without her light, the sun will forget the way. The gods will sleep forever." Panic took them. Some fled into the trees, some collapsed in the sand, wailing into the wind. The hunters lifted their spears toward the sky, shaking them uselessly at the void. The shaman turned inland. The mountain loomed above the forest, its peak crowned with mist. In the absence of the moon, it looked like a shadow rising from the world's spine. He raised his staff toward it. "There," he said, "that is where the voice of the earth god breathes. That is where she is kept." He looked to the tribe, his face lit by nothing. "We must climb. We must beg. We must offer something greater than words." No one spoke, but they followed, slow, shivering, barefoot, into the forest that now moved without wind. The trees leaned inward, branches whispering in tongues too old to name. Ash fell from the sky, though there was no fire. It clung to their hair, their lashes, their open mouths. When they reached the foot of the mountain, they stopped. The shaman knelt and pressed his hand to the stone. It was warm, faintly alive. The mountain was breathing. Behind him, the people fell silent. The forest, too, fell still. Even the sea's roar faded to a murmur. And in that silence, a sound came, faint and hollow, from within the mountain itself. It was like a voice made of stone, a deep, slow whisper that none could understand, yet all could feel. The shaman's eyes filled with tears. He looked up to the void where the moon should have been and whispered, trembling, "Speak to us, if you still remember our names." But the gods did not answer. Only the mountain breathed, and the world kept turning, blind and heavy, beneath a sky that no longer cared to see. The mountain waited. Its slopes rose like the back of a sleeping god, ribs of stone glistening with dew and ash. The tribe stood at its base, trembling, eyes hollow from sleeplessness and fear. The shaman faced the mountain alone, his breath slow, his voice gone dry from prayer. Around his feet, the soil steamed faintly, the blood-warm breath of the earth god below. He turned to his people. "The moon has been swallowed," he said. "Her light lies in the belly of the stone. Only a voice made of blood can call her back." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. No one moved. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then the shaman began to climb. The mountain's path was steep, torn by roots and bones of old trees that had never known sunlight. Each step tore his feet open. The rocks were hot, almost pulsing. The others watched from below, small, dark shapes against the vast gray. They whispered his name, then fell silent, afraid the gods might hear. The climb felt endless. Wind howled through unseen cracks, carrying whispers that did not belong to the world of men. Some sounded like laughter, some like mourning. The shaman ignored them all. His body bled freely now. The earth drank each drop without sound. Halfway up, he stopped. The air grew dense, and a strange light shimmered within the mist. A dull glow, neither fire nor moonlight, but something older. It pulsed in rhythm with his heart. He raised his staff toward it, and the light shivered, as if recognizing him. He pressed on, climbing into the radiance. At the summit, he found a hollow carved into the rock, a natural bowl, vast and smooth, filled with mist that moved as if alive. The air smelled of metal and salt. The mountain's voice echoed faintly there, a deep rumble that came and went, the slow breathing of creation itself. He planted his staff in the ground. "This is your mouth," he said softly, "and I am your tongue." He knelt and drew a circle around himself using ash from his pouch. Within it, he traced symbols older than speech, the marks his ancestors had left on cave walls long before the first word was born. Spirals for birth, lines for death, a single dot for the moon. He placed his hands upon his chest. "Take this shape," he whispered, "and remember us." Then he began to chant. The words were not his own. They came from somewhere deeper, from the soil, from the water, from the marrow of the world. His voice rose and fell with the pulse of the mountain. The wind circled him, gathering speed. Dust swirled. The mist began to glow, first white, then silver, then blue. Below, the tribe saw the light and fell to their knees. The shaman's voice grew louder, breaking through the storm that now rose around him. His eyes rolled back, showing only white. The air vibrated with sound, the kind that lives between thunder and breath. The rocks trembled, cracks opened, exhaling hot wind. The people cried out, clutching their faces, unable to bear the brilliance blooming atop the mountain. The shaman stood. His body burned with light, veins of silver running through his flesh. His staff blazed, the bone ornament at its tip glowing like the moon reborn. He lifted it toward the void above and screamed a single word. It was not a plea. It was a command. Rise. For a moment, nothing. Then, movement. The clouds tore apart. The air itself groaned. From the horizon, a faint white glow began to bloom. It spread slowly, pushing back the black. The sea below roared in answer, waves striking the cliffs with renewed fury. The tribe fell prostrate, their cries lost beneath the wind. The light climbed higher, trembling, uncertain. The moon's edge appeared, thin, fragile, but alive. Gasps broke through the darkness. "She returns," someone whispered. But the shaman did not hear. His skin cracked like dry earth. Light poured from the wounds. His flesh no longer bled. It burned. He looked upward, tears of white fire streaming down his face. "Do you see us?" he whispered. "Do you remember your children?" The mountain shuddered violently, throwing stones and dust into the air. The mist rose in spirals, wrapping around the shaman's body. He did not resist. The light consumed him, layer by layer, until his form was no longer solid, but made of brightness itself. His voice, still chanting, echoed through the wind. Below, the moon grew fuller, brighter. Her light touched the sea once more. The waves calmed. The trees swayed. Animals emerged from the forest, eyes wide, unafraid. The world exhaled. At the summit, the light flared one final time, so bright that even the stars blinked. When it faded, the shaman was gone. Only his staff remained, glowing faintly in the dust. The mountain was silent again, the air was cool, and from the horizon, the moon began to climb, whole and luminous, as if reborn from the breath of man. The tribe wept. They raised their hands toward her light, whispering the shaman's name. The oldest among them said, "He became her voice, and she, his answer." For the first time in many nights, the world was bright again. But the light felt different, heavier, wiser, touched by sorrow. The gods had spoken through silence, and humanity had finally listened. Dawn never came that morning, only moonlight. The sky remained dark, but no longer cruel. The moon had returned, vast and pale, her edges bright as bone, her center soft as breath. She floated above the sea like a wound healed, her light spilling gently across the world she had abandoned. Every ripple of water, every grain of sand, every eyelid still trembling from fear, all of it drank her glow. The tribe stood at the base of the mountain. Their faces were streaked with ash and salt, but in their eyes there was peace. They looked upward, not with the old worship, but with a new understanding. Quiet, humble, unspoken. The gods were not above them anymore. They were within, in every breath, in every trembling of the earth. The sea had calmed. Its surface mirrored the moon perfectly, so that the world seemed to hold two skies, one above, one below, each remembering the other. The air smelled of rain, but none fell. The earth was wet anyway, heavy with the tears of the night. On the mountain summit, the shaman's staff still stood, alone, upright, glowing faintly with silver fire. No one dared to touch it. It pulsed slowly, like a heart still beating. Around it, the dust had settled into a perfect circle, smooth as if shaped by unseen hands. Within that circle, No shadow existed. An elder approached the base of the mountain, his voice trembling. His light became her path, he whispered, and she followed it home. The others bowed their heads. Some wept silently. Others smiled through their tears. The youngest child, the same who once asked why the moon looked sick, pointed upward and said softly, "She is watching us again." The old woman beside him nodded. "Yes," she said, "but now she knows our names." They gathered at the shore. The water was cold, but they stepped into it anyway. The reflection of the moon broke beneath their feet, then reformed, whole again each time. They raised their hands, palms open to the sky. No drums, no chants, only silence. The kind that exists when the world listens. The shaman's apprentice, now silent, trembling, walked into the shallows and dipped his hands beneath the surface. When he lifted them, drops of moonlight clung to his fingers. He pressed them to his forehead. The gesture was simple, but it felt eternal. The others followed, marking themselves with the light, as if to remember that the divine had once passed through flesh. Above them, the moon climbed higher. Her brightness softened the scars of the land, the burned fields, the fallen trees, the bones of animals now at rest. Every wound glittered as if dusted with silver. The earth, too, seemed to heal under her gaze. The night stretched on without fear. No one slept. They sat in silence, watching her reflection shift upon the waves, feeling the cool wind brush their faces. In that stillness, they finally understood. The gods were not meant to be perfect. They were change itself, creation and destruction, light and loss, one and the same. At last, the old woman spoke again. Her voice was low but strong, carrying through the quiet air. The moon fell so that we might learn to lift our eyes. The gods sleep and wake, but we remain to remember. The sea answered her with a gentle sigh. The shaman's staff flickered once, then dimmed, not extinguished, but quiet, like a candle after prayer. The wind moved across the valley, and with it came the faint scent of herbs and smoke, the trace of his spirit passing between the worlds. The moon reached her highest place. Her light washed over the tribe, the sea, the mountain, and the ashes of all that had burned. The world breathed again. The narrator's voice fades into a whisper, timeless and human. And that's how humanity survived. Once again.